Similarly, with religion, now there is a right to propagate that constitutions have. Where does the right derive from? There is an assumption of a monotheism, a bipartite worldview that there is a believer, there is a non-believer. Believer has a duty to convert the non-believer into believing in his faith. So it is the natural right or natural tendency of humans to propagate and convert. Now, from there derives the right to propagate. From the natural duty of conversion comes a right to propagate. To curtail this excesses of this right, there is a church state separation, we have the religion denomination, we have a lot of constructs put in to make sure there are enough checks and balances, but these checks and balances are all coming from the fundamental assumption of one trying to go about and expressing himself, not just expressing himself, imposing himself on others and convert others into his own ways. Again, this is fundamentally not the way in which we look at the world. There are many ways to look at the world. Many people look at the world differently. Many people have different ways to fulfill themselves. They may engage with each other in harmonious ways. Now, each way is consistent within, and anybody who has better solutions for present and future in terms of how one can fulfill, he is going to have more influence in the society, which is natural. As long as there is no conflict, one has to be, each way of life or each tradition has to be inward looking. Now, this gives rise to a sampradaya ecosystem as we have in the Hindu society. If this is the fundamental premise, we are not going to have a state that gives a right to propagate. Again, because the worldview is different, it is going to result in a different social theory, it is going to result in a different principles for the state or doctrine for the state. In turn, that will result in a different set of laws and policies. Jurisprudence is another case where, again, it's a complex set. It is again based on several theories. One, we have ideals, equality and justice, although they have their own trade-off, they are sought to be fulfilled. Then there is a concept of rights, then there is a concept of public morality, then there is a theory of penalty. How do we impose penalty? Why do we impose penalty? What are the goals? How do we ensure it is just? Where we bring transformation? How do we deter crime? And things like that. I mean, it's a complex set, but all these are underlying jurisprudence. So if we are, whereas the entire set of theories is going to alter when we talk of a Dharma Rajya. We know there is a cosmic order. We know there is a natural order, which is the microcosm of the cosmic order. We know there is a nature of man. Man innately craves to be happy, to fulfill himself. Then we say there are duties of state to enforce order or to ensure order is there, and state has the responsibility to impose an efficient penalty. And the purpose of penalty is not primarily deterrence of crime. Deterrence of crime is a side effect. Primarily, king has to impose penalty because if the penalty is not imposed, the criminal's paradha is going to be suffering. So that the criminal doesn't suffer in the higher worlds, he has to suffer here. He has to expiate for it in this world. And king is actually helping people by doing that, by delivering just penalties. Now, king is therefore not the enemy of criminal either, and he is not enemy of the innocent also. At the same time, he is dispassionately delivering his justice, and he is also ensuring through this uh, to a proportionate penalty, he is helping the criminal, and he is also creating enough discouragement in the innocent people. So the fearlessness among innocent and fear and due expiation among the criminals. This is how Dharmarajya posits the fundamentals of penalty. Education is the next most important sphere, although it is uh, a lot is talked about this, but not a lot is done, again for the same reason of knowledge not being synthesized enough. Whereas data is abundant. In fact, if we see, we know how Literacy has been weaponized between 1820 and 1931. Literacy has been used as a weapon, uh, has been used as an incentive for people who are literate. They can get into government jobs. People who are not literate cannot get into those jobs. Exploitation happens primarily because literacy was not there. Innocent, illiterate people were duped. So there is a century of history behind why literacy became a goal. And after independence, literacy was kept in such an importance without sufficient review of what caused the importance of literacy. If we see critics by Anand Kumaraswamy and others, I mean, literacy, he in fact he wrote the bugbear of literacy, saying literacy is not primary, education is primary. Literacy, in fact, if we to see today literacy is not that important. In fact, there are so many ways. There are audio video conversions. The technology has developed so much, so writing skill is not that important these days. Things change, and when things change, the priorities also need to change. That sufficiently cannot reflect in our education policies unless we again synthesize the required knowledge. The goals for life, let us say, we say this is the goal of life. Man craves happiness. For that, he seeks to fulfill himself. For that fulfillment, he tries to gain knowledge that is required for his fulfillment. And that knowledge he needs to gain from the subjects he is learning. So there is one holistic view of life. There is just one subject that we, not one subject, one text that we teach, which is an encyclopedic text, which teaches all the subjects. That's an ideal education. The same text should have uh, general knowledge, nature of life, how we are going to understand life, how we are going to solve problems, everything put together into one text. That is the ideal education or ideal curriculum. Now, to get there, we need to be able to posit this as a problem, formulate this statement, and then go about it. And to be able to formulate this problem statement, we need to first bring that worldview in a more formal way into the theoretical framework. Economy is another sphere where practical, it is assumed that a lot of things happen practically rather than theoretically. Yet, a lot of things happen more theoretically than practically. In fact, if we draw a simple contrast, we can say the West has given us an economic culture, whereas India has always been a cultural economy. So there is the same bipartite worldview, the insider outsider assumption. Then there is an economic view of man. There is a capital and resource management problems are formulated in a certain way, and they have resulted in certain past, certain record in the West. Let us say the capital and manpower and skill management. The problems of this have resulted in what kinds of institutions in the West. They have first seen slavery, then they have seen the serfdom or the feudalism, then they have seen an industrialization, then they have seen an employment culture, then they have an anti-exploitation law. So there has been a evolution in the West, of course, towards what they think is better and better, and it is morally improving also. Yet, the assumptions that are causing these, that view of man, is not sufficiently critical. Whereas in a cultural economy, we have a holistic worldview. Economy is not the goal. Economy is a byproduct. We take a cultural view of economy. We build the social and cultural institutions. They are the vehicles of economy, and economy is generated as a side effect or as a result. That brings a very different view to how we are going to create institutions, how we are going to frame policies. Now, if there are groups that are invested in excellence, that are inward looking, and these groups have enough capital, social capital, financial capital, skill capital, and therefore they have enough bargaining power in the society. There is no need for state to do much. And society is governing itself and generating its own wealth. That's how India has progressed over ages, and we know the track record also. We have been most prosperous, at the same time, we have been least exploitative. We did not have to create slavery to exploit manpower to generate our wealth. We could generate our wealth without having to exploit. And this fundamental moral superiority, we can just say as a track record. Anybody looking at past can say make this statement, but at the same time, there is no theoretical framework that we have today built that can translate into official policy. So, in that sense, based on our worldview, we have to generate our social theory. Then that translates into a principle for statecraft, which can only then result into a set of laws and policies that a state can implement towards uh, realizing a cultural economy.